Hello and welcome back once again to After the Credits. So this is something that came and went out of theaters before I even realized it was a thing. I don't even remember seeing any advertisements that they were doing a new version of this series, but apparently there was another Yu-Gi-Oh movie. So the only reason I found out about this one is I was over at the Dollar Theater the other day, and it just happened to be playing there, and I was like, when the hell did that even come out? It apparently never made it to my local big theater here, but it's been out for a little while. It might be out on DVD by the time you're seeing this, because I am ridiculously far behind on editing videos and getting them up because my work schedule has been a nightmare. They've had me doing 7-day weeks with 12-hour days and closing and opening. So like I'll close one night, have to be back 8 hours later to open, and I live about an hour and a half away from work. So by the time I get home, I basically have enough time to shower and go right back to work. So my schedule's been a nightmare, so I just haven't had much time to really sit down and focus on editing. I've been recording more stuff, as you guys are going to see once I get these going. For the time being, I apologize for falling behind, but there is more content coming, I do promise you that. So today's video is about Yu-Gi-Oh! The Darkside of Dimensions, I believe it was called. Again, I had no idea this movie was coming out, or I probably would have planned for it, but it happened to pop up at the Dollar Theater, and I was like, oh, I guess that's out, so why not? It's only $1. So I went and watched it, and I liked it, but disliked it at the same time. I liked it for the nostalgic point that it kind of took me back to when I used to enjoy watching Yu-Gi-Oh! I liked the other movie, but then like once the next generations of Yu-Gi-Oh! Started, I kind of fell out of it. I watched like the first part of the first season of the new one after Yugi's main story ended, and then it went into, I want to say Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, but I could be wrong. And then they had the later one where they were on motorcycles or whatever, I don't know. So I didn't really follow it much past that, and now there's a new movie. So this movie basically picks up a couple years after the first series ends, once all the Millennium items were returned, and Yugi had a duel with the Pharaoh, and then their lives kind of returned to normal because all the Millennium items were gone, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Just kind of went back to being a card game. So now they're graduating high school, or year 12 or whatever you guys call it in other countries, because they're based out of Japan in the story, I guess. But we catch up with the entire gang a couple years later. They're all kind of just settling into their new lives, getting ready for graduation. They're still all friends. They're all still all doing their same things. And Kaiba, who is still the businessman, and his little brother are looking for the remains of the Millennium Puzzle because Kaiba wants to have one more duel with the Pharaoh. Basically saying the Pharaoh is the only person who ever actually beat him, and he wants to one more showdown to prove that he can beat the Pharaoh, and he's going through all this trouble to find the pieces of the Millennium Puzzle so he can have Yugi put it back together, summon the Pharaoh, and have their final battle. Well, during all that, we meet these other characters who were given power by an 8th Millennium item. After the Millennium items were returned and the Pharaoh went away, this 8th item got its power and passed its power on to this generation of people, and they were charged with protecting this last Millennium item. And now one of them has kind of corrupted, and it's basically kind of a Jedi story in that he's letting his fear get the better of him, where he's supposed to be a broker of peace and not know fear. He's actually giving in to fear, and that's causing him to do bad things, and he doesn't realize he's doing these bad things. But he's doing these bad things for what he feels is the right reason, and that's to create this peaceful utopia by eliminating other people who he thinks are doing bad things who aren't really doing anything, if any of that made any sense. So it comes down to playing a game of cards, again, because for some reason everything in this world is settled by cards. But through the power of the 8th Millennium item, he's able to create a new aspect to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, which is dimension summoning, where you can sacrifice a portion of your life points to automatically summon a monster to the field, and the amount of life points you sacrifice is how many attack and defense points that monster now has. So it's like a new learning curve for Yugi, and he's got to kind of overcome not having ever played this before, which is like the same thing that happened in every Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, is like each season something new would be added to the game, and he'd have to learn it on the fly. So he kind of gets good at it, and then Kaiba holds this big tournament where it's only going to be the best of the best, which turns out to be just these three: the guy who's doing all the stuff in the dimension summoning, Yugi, because obviously he has the Millennium Puzzle and he can call back the Pharaoh, and Kaiba because Kaiba's the best at everything. So basically it boils down to, over the course of time you find out that this kid has also found the Millennium Ring, which houses the evil spirit. So that spirit now goes into this other kid who's corrupted by his evil ways, and now the ring amplifies it, making him even worse. So now we not only have the dimension summoning, but we're back to the shadow games. So Yugi's kind of playing on 3 different fronts here, and Yugi's playing as himself. The Pharaoh doesn't actually show up until like the very end, and that's just to kind of end the duel and put a stop to everything. And that's like a single card move. And it's like when Yugi's about to fall and he says like, I still believe in the heart of the cards, and then that's when the Pharaoh finally takes back control of his body, draws the final card, ends the game, blah, blah, blah. But that's kind of jumping ahead. So we have the tournament, and of course Kaiba wants to be the first to battle Yugi, and Yugi's like, no, I'm going to battle him first, and Kaiba's like, this is my tournament, I make the rules, and he's like, well, if you want me to do what you want me to do, we're going to play my way. So Kaiba's like, fine, whatever. So they have a basically 3-person kind of round-robin tournament. Yugi beats the other guy doing the dimension summoning, and then he's facing off against Kaiba for the final showdown, and then that duel is interrupted by the other guy coming back with the Millennium Ring, and then there's like a 2-on-1 event where Yugi and Kaiba team up to take down the evil spirit. Once that's done, Kaiba's like, well, we'll finish our duel on another day. I got some other stuff to do, and walks away. And it's basically just saying that he respects the Pharaoh, and since the Pharaoh just showed up to save their asses at the end, he's going to let the Pharaoh have a pass. And then it comes down to Kaiba finding another way to track down the Pharaoh to where he can finally have this duel, which potentially kind of leaves it open for a sequel, but not really. It's the way it sets it. A lot would have to change in order for this to be made into a sequel. It'd almost have to be like a history rewriting type of thing. And that's a bit of a spoiler, but I'm not going to say how much of a spoiler or why it's a spoiler. So ultimately it plays out like every other season of Yu-Gi-Oh!, but it's kind of crammed into a 2 hour and a half episode. So basically an entire season packed into 3 episodes equivalent is what it is. And it kind of falls into this thing of they're trying to do too much at one time and not having enough space to fully lay out everything that's going on and set everything up the way they would like to. Had they just done this as another season, like, hey, we're bringing Yu-Gi-Oh! Back for an additional season and we're just catching up with everyone and here's what's going on, and made it like a big, long, season-wide tournament like the other seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! Were, it probably would have worked out better, but they crammed it into an hour and a half and it was what it was. So what would I give it as far as a star rating? Like I said, I did like that it kind of took me back to when I used to watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, at first I'm watching, I'm like, okay, so we're catching up with the guys, that's kind of cool. And then it got to the point I'm like, okay, are we actually going to do anything in this movie, or are we just going to sit here talking the entire time? And then once it finally got up to the tournament, and it's like, okay, this kind of takes me back, so I'm kind of back into it. But then by the end, it's like, okay, that was kind of a cheaped out ending, but I still liked it because it's a Yu-Gi-Oh! Episode. That's how it would end, basically. So for that, I'm going to give it, honestly, for a Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's kind of a middle of the road, but it took me back a bit. So I'm going to give it a little bit more for that. So I'm going to give it a 3.5, just above the middle of the road. But overall, for a Yu-Gi-Oh! Film, it was just kind of average for what I was expecting from Yu-Gi-Oh! But it was nice to catch up with the characters and see where they've been since then. So yeah, gets a 3.5 for me. Nothing much else to say about it other than that. Alright, so that is it for this episode. Again, as always, thank you guys for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share the video. The links are down in the description. Click the bell up here in the corner. Make sure you're getting alerts every time I post new content. And until next time, we'll see you after the credits.